What do you say, gang? I was asked how my knives are always so sharp. I'm just one of those guys that can't stand a dull blade. Dull blades are more dangerous than sharp blades, in my opinion. There's a lot of factors that come into play when you're talking blade steels. Their toughness, their hardness, their edge retention, so many things. HRC level of Rockwell hardnesses. It's as long as it is wide. You guys can look up tool steels, you can look up knife steels, powdered steels. We have a company here in the United States called Crucible. They supply a lot of the high-end super steels like MagnaCut to knife makers, both in the United States and abroad. So many different steel types, and all of them have a different attribute to them. When I buy a knife, most generally they never come in as sharp as I would like them to be. And I sharpen knives in two manners, and I'll explain that. But this is the most high-tech piece that I have that I use when I'm sharpening my knives. This is just a generic work sharp with a ceramic, 2 steel diamond plates, a coarse and a fine, and then a leather strop, as well as a serrated edge sharpener right there. And it has a 20-degree guide on either side. I don't concern myself so much with the bevel degrees. A lot of knife snobs out there that are just over the top on, it's gotta be 17 degrees, or it's gotta be this, or it's gotta be... I don't care. I match the factory grinds as best I can. And I mentioned there's a couple of different sharpening mentalities. There's a toothy sharpness, and by toothy I just mean when you start your cut, it grabs onto what you're cutting and pulls it into the steel. It's a very, very sharp type of sharpening. At the same time, there is a glass sharpening. The glass sharpening is just what it sounds like. You slice through something, it's like you're just slicing through air. I can kind of give you an example here. So I'm going to grab a generic knife, about as generic as they get. This is a Chinese, $10 Damascus. It's true Damascus, but I don't know what the core is. The steel type isn't on here, but we're gonna listen to how it sounds when we cut. Okay, when this came in, it was a butter knife, but just listen. Can you hear the noise? That's what you're wanting to listen to. I'll do it again so you can listen again. Listen to the noise. Almost sounds like it's ripping, but as you can see, it just pulls right through the paper without any problem at all. Alright, and that's a cheap generic steel. Now we're going to go to a higher end steel. By higher end, let's break out the S90V. S90V is a very good steel. It's in the premium steel family. This is on my bug out. I want you to listen again. Okay? You hear the difference? Hear it? How much smoother that sounds? Now, you can go further. I can go further on this and even further polish. Sorry about that. Further polish the grind. I lost my internet, so I figured I'd start a video. I could polish my edge to a mirror shine and stand a piece of newspaper up on its end and just whoosh, right down through it. But how do I sharpen my knives? Well, you see a bunch of stones laid out here, some ceramics, some hard stones. Got an Arkansas hard stone. Got Norton stones, roughly 800 grit. We've got a 1000 grit K-bar. Now if we look at this, you'll be able to see how wore out that stone is. I don't use that stone. This stone is just, it's an older stone, and I keep it typically in my camp pack for an emergency sharpening. But I've also got a ceramic rod in there that I use as well, similar to this. So we'll set that one aside. That's the K-bar improved number 1000 sharpening stone. It's really, really soft. It's almost like sandstone. But then we come over here. If I have a blade that's in really bad shape, which we're gonna go through, and I'm gonna do a time lapse of me sharpening about as generic a knife as I could find in my collection. This is a Frank's Piston Service Incorporated from Marion, Indiana. And it's just a gimmick knife, you know, it's a freebie, like, you know, freebie pins. Just flips down, slides up, and there's your blade. So we're going to try to cut through a piece of paper with it right now. Ready? All right, as you can see, that's about as dull as you get. And this small of a blade is difficult to sharpen on pretty much any system. But I'm going to give it a go, starting off with my coarse Norton stone, going to my Arkansas hard stone, and then finishing up over here on my razor strop. Yes, this is a straight razor strop. It is made by a company that goes by the name of Franz Swati, and it is from Austria. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of the town there. But this one I use a little bit of water on as I'm stropping, and you only move in one direction. If I've got a edge or a knife like this that I get in new that's just horrid, I start aggressive, I go finer, I go finer, I go finer. Sometimes I'll just, if I'm in a hurry, I will just grab the work sharp and start on my coarse side, go from my coarse side to my fine side, come up to my ceramic, and then come over to strop. And I sharpen until I have a bead running the length of the edge. And when I say a bead, it's just a roll of steel that is not quite yet come off of the bitter edge of the knife. And most of the time I just break out a jeweler's loop and I get a look at it, and I look for that roll. I look for it. Once I get it and once I find it, I'll then work with the ceramic until I'm able to get that rolled edge off of the cutting edge of the blade. Once I get that off the cutting edge of the blade, then the strop comes into play. So like I said, I'm going to run this on time lapse because it's going to take a while. Something else that I do is I actually have a microscope, and on some of my edges, like on my Demco, guys, look, see if I can get that edge to glint for you guys. There, you can see that glint going across that edge. That is a glassy sharpening. I'll show you here. Just butter, just goes right through it. So to get to that degree of an edge on a knife that came in sharp, it was a toothy sharp. All I had to do was work that toothy sharp for a little while until I polished the cutting edge on both sides. I still formed a bead along it, still got the bead off, and finished up over here on my stropping plate. So without any further ado, let's get that time lapse going. We're gonna see what we can do with this cheap over-the-counter gimme 1960s freebie knife. See if we can't get this thing to where it has a nice toothy edge. So hang on. All right. You guys can see from the time lapse, it did not take any time at all. This is a really, really, really soft steel. Really soft steel. I was surprised at just how few strokes it took, but you may have noticed, albeit quickly, that I used the same number of strokes on either side. Each side got the same number of strokes. Let me repeat that just one more time, just so that it kind of sinks in a little bit. Are you ready? Same number of strokes. That's probably mostly my OCD, but I get very good results from it. Boy, it's some really, really thin blade stock there. Okay, so right now, if I feel that edge, I do not feel a burr. I turn it over and I feel that burr. The burr that's on the bitter edge. All right, now right now this knife is sharp. I'll go ahead and show you. The knife is sharp. Okay? Took very little to get it to that point. But I'm not done. Now we have to strop. So, since I don't have any water handy, I'm going to bring in my Work Sharp leather strop. I'm popping they're on by magnets. I'm popping off my diamond plate scales so that I don't accidentally hit the edge on them. Because the way that they sit in there, if I slip, I can end up catching that edge. So, better safe than sorry. Work Sharp is available, by the way. And now, what I'm going to do is simply same number of pulls. I'm going to give it 1, 2, 3. Come back on this side. 1, 2, 3. 3 more on this side. 1. See how I just slipped there? That would have caught that diamond plate. 2, 3. Last 3. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to check for my burr again, and I always wipe the blade off after I'm done with each sharpening process, so I'm not transferring grit from one stone to another or transferring grit from a stone to my strop. So, feeling of it, I do not feel a burr. I'll turn it over, and I still feel a little bit of a burr, so I need to keep going until that burr disappears. Remember the last 3 I went this way, it pulled that burr By going this way, it pulled that burr over. So count them out again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And you can see how the strop lightens up a little bit. That's catching the burr. That's just showing me that it's catching that burr. And it should roll it over to this side if it's still there. Just the tiniest little bit I can feel here. Okay? So, come back. 3 again. 1, 2, 3. The blade is so thin it's flexing. 1, 2, 3. In theory, that burr should be on this side now because I'm pulling. As I pull, it'll push that burr over. You feel? I no longer feel the burr. Let's set this stuff out of the way. And you guys might wonder, well, Zippo, how do you find your angle? Well, it's right there. The angle's there. Let's take a look at that edge and see if we catch a glint off that edge. See that glint? Get the other side. See the glint? Cheap generic steel. Now, it should be kind of in between a toothy cut and a polished cut, a glassy cut. All right, we'll cut and we'll listen. There we go. That was a very dull knife that I was able to, of course it's generic steel, so it's going to sharpen quickly. It's also going to lose its edge quickly. All right. I can go in, you know, if it was one of my higher end knives, like my Benchmade Bug Out or my Demco 80 20.5, I can go in and loop it, look at the edge just by getting up close and personal, and just pulling it through and inspecting the edge, just see if I can see something that I can't see with the naked eye, like a chip or something like that. I did notice this blade has a chip right there. My fingernail is caught in that chip. I don't care. This is just for showing you purposes only. So that's how I sharpen knives. I inspect with the loop on the higher end knives. I look for the burr. I also look for a nice, even, polished edge. And looking at this, I've got that edge nice and evenly polished all the way up to that chip. So, generic knife, hair popping sharp. That is how I sharpen my knives. And like I said, I do use a microscope on my higher end knives, like that one. And like, let's go ahead and pull the Chris Reeve knife out here. I'll show you guys the glint that comes off of that edge. And this is S35VN. We'll roll her down. See that nice polished edge going all the way down. Both sides. These harder steels, they take longer to get a good edge on, so you do have to be patient. And another thing that the jeweler's loop helps me do is to see if I'm maintaining my angle. Because like I say, I don't use a gauge. I use the actual cutting edge of the blade. Okay, this is a convex grind. Okay, so it's thick up here, it gets thinner, it gets thinner, it gets thinner. But then, about the last 3/32 of an inch to 1/8 inch of this blade is thicker than the material behind it. And that is by design so that this knife can be sharpened over and over and over and over again for a long time and make slicing just effortless. Super, super effortless. So there you go. The question was asked. I hope this answers it. Now, my stones. You may have seen in the time lapse that I was rubbing something on the stone. I was taking off the material of the last knife that I sharpened, which I should have done when I finished sharpening whatever knife it was. And I just use a common silicone eraser to get in there, and it will pull the metal out. It will clean. I'll show you here on the ceramic. On the ceramic rod, I typically use the sides a lot when I'm finishing up. You can see by the groove that's wore into that eraser. So all I do is I just run it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Just like so. And you can see here we've cleaned that. It's kind of hard to see. We've cleaned a lot of that material out of the stone, out of the ceramic. So that's it. That's how I sharpen my knives. I know this is kind of long. Now that we've reached the end, for those of you who are still hanging out, I've got a problem. I took a trip in Clifford down to Indianapolis, which is about an hour south of me, and I went down there to pick up Clifford's birthday present. Clifford turned 30 in October, and I wanted to get Clifford some new wheels. So I went down there, they're secondhand wheels, went and picked up those wheels, and I got back home, let them rest in the back of the truck for a day because it was cold out. And when I went out yesterday I had to wait on lug nuts to arrive in the mail, chrome lug nuts, so mag wheel lug nuts. But when it came in, when they came in, I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and mount a couple of these and make sure that they mount up okay before I go get new tires put on the truck. So doesn't take long to change tire. I jack the truck up in the front, changed both the front wheels out, and when I backed Clifford out, I had 2 little puddles of oil. Clifford has never leaked anything, so I am hoped, because dripping off of the torque converter cover on the transmission and the oil pan in between the two, which is indicative of a main seal going, and on the oil filter. Now, it's got the original clutch fan on it, not an electric fan, so it could have been blowing the oil off the oil filter onto the torque converter cover, and it was just dripping in 2 spots. It was enough oil that I was just mildly concerned by about that much. Clifford has never had an oil leak before, so I'm going to go change the oil today, and fingers crossed it's just the oil filter failure. The gasket on the oil filter has failed. That is my hopes. It is time to change the oil in Clifford, and I've got everything out there to do it. So I'm going to go out there and brave the cold, get the shop warmed up as best I can, pull all my babies out into the nice white yard. Yes, we've got about 1 inch of snow on the ground. Came in last night. But anyway, I may go ahead and bring the camera out there so we can all take a look together to see where that oil leak's coming from. If it persists, after the oil change. So if it does, I'll crack the camera on. If it doesn't, no sense in you guys watching a boring oil change video. You guys can, let me think. Yeah, I'll get the other two rims mounted to the back of Clifford, and the thumbnail picture will be Clifford with its new shoes on. New shoes, old rubber, so I do have to get another set of tires, which I fully anticipated. But you guys can let me know how you think Clifford looks. Anyway, that's it. Friendly Neighborhood Zippo. Glad you guys made it this far. And if you made it this far, give me a comment about Clifford. That way I know that you made it this far. I promise you, I will see you all on the next one. Later. I'm out of here.